Do you hear that music? That's the sound of New Orleans. I'm going to be talking today with my daughter, Cassie Durham, and I'm also going to be talking with Lauren Strickland. My name's Angie Durham, and I'm your host. Let me tell you about the Revealed podcast if you've never listened to us before. It's where stories are revealed and where God is revealed in your stories. You'll hear stories from people who live or have an affiliation with the Red Hills region of Southwest Georgia. And the people who share come from all walks of life. They're male and female, and they have different backgrounds. Some stories will leave you wondering how the storyteller ever survived. Others are simple, but will touch your heart. And we hope the stories that you hear will encourage you in your own walk. I've invited Cassie and Lauren to share with me today because we have just gotten back from a mission trip to New Orleans just a couple of weeks ago. But the stories we're going to talk to you about today aren't just limited to New Orleans. They're going to be other stories that we've encountered as we've been in different locations. And as everyone knows who's listened to the podcast, we always like to just start off and ask random questions. So Lauren is originally from Thomasville, and heck, I've known Lauren a really long time because this will tell my age. She used to babysit my children. And so Cassie was one of those children that was babysat by Lauren, as there were many other kids in Thomasville, right, Lauren?
Yes.
Yeah. And Cassie and Lauren probably have secrets about babysitting they've never told me before, but that's okay. But Lauren currently works at Jerger, so a lot of people know Lauren, and you are currently in the capacity of kindergarten teacher, correct?
Yes.
And as I was thinking about this podcast, I was thinking that kids that age have really funny things that they say. So I was just wondering if you could share with us just something funny that you've heard a kid say or write down.
Oh man, there's just so much because I feel like I just spend all day laughing. But I feel like one of the funniest things to me was I had a child come in and tell me that her dad had gotten a new donkey. And so we spent all day talking about the donkey, and I was asking her questions about the donkey. And so when the child was being picked up, I told the parents, I said, so I heard y'all got a new donkey. Come to find out it was a doggy, not a donkey.
That's so cute.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me one time that one of the kids said that the things they would remember most about you was that their teacher smelled like peanut butter.
Yes.
Now
yes.
tell that story.
So I'll frequently, if I don't have a chance to eat or just things get busy throughout the day, I'll just grab a spoonful of peanut butter. And one of the kids made a memory book for me at the end of the year. And one of the questions was, what's your favorite memory about Miss Strickland? And it said, Miss Strickland always smells like peanut butter. And so they always are making me laugh.
Yes. And just to share a funny on Cassie, one of the funniest things from that age, that it was in pre-K actually, the movie Madagascar was really popular. And so she and Grayson would watch that movie all the time. And Cassie was just convinced that the way that you pronounced Madagascar was without, well, let's just say that I can't say the way that she was pronouncing it on this podcast because it's a Christian podcast, right? So, but it has something to do with donkey. Okay, so we're going back to that. But she just was convinced that was the way that you pronounced it, and she just put her foot down about that and said, "No, it's not Madagascar, it's Madagar." And so, even to this day, when she sees her pre-K teacher, her pre-K teacher always remembers that. So, Cassie, there you go. Yeah. So, here's our random question for both of you. What's your favorite part of Thanksgiving dinner?
Probably, okay, I'm a huge stuffing person, so I love stuffing or pie. Pumpkin pie is pretty good.
Do you like your no-no stuffing?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Only hers.
I think mine would have to be growing up, my grandma's mac and cheese. That was my favorite part of Thanksgiving.
Yes. Well, those both sound good to me. Now, as we're moving on with the podcast, I just want to talk to y'all a little bit about just going on this recent trip to New Orleans because I'm going to be honest, before we left, I had some apprehension about going. And it just had to do with COVID, it had to do with riots, and I was more concerned about being a responsible adult who was going to have children that I was having to look after, and I just did not want anything to happen to those children. Did y'all have apprehension before you went on the trip?
I did at the beginning, and I mean, for many of the same reasons, just feeling like, am I making the right choice? Am I making the responsible choice? And a mentor this time last year, right after the mission trip, had told me, she said, Lauren, just be obedient to whatever God is calling you to do. And she encouraged me to be obedient in the small things. And then one day I would be able to be obedient in the bigger things. And so I feel like I just spent a year of being obedient in the little things. And so when this decision came, just choosing to be obedient despite my feelings was kind of the theme of the whole trip for me. So
what about you, Cassie?
For me, I wasn't really apprehensive about it. I was more excited just because I knew that, like, if we were going, it was for a reason and God would protect us. And I feel like I kept telling you that too whenever you were kind of freaking out about it a little bit. I'd be like, it's okay, Mom, like, if we're going, like, we're going for a reason type of thing. So I didn't really feel like, because I just felt like I was like given a peace about it. So yeah.
And I need to give just a little bit of backstory. So Lauren is very involved with the Walk Youth Group here in Thomasville, and it's a non-denominational youth group, and it's run by Chris and Amy Cooper, and they literally used to have the youth group over at their home. And I always said anybody who would have 100 kids at their house was called. So we no longer meet at their house, and I'm just a volunteer because Cassie is involved in the group. But that's who we went on the mission trip with, and we took 43 kids.
Yeah.
Is that the total? Yeah. So what we do is a little bit different. So when people ask me, what did you guys do on the mission trip? I think they're expecting me to say, well, we went to a house that needed to be rehabbed, and we painted, we hammered things, we cleaned things up. But would you guys speak a little bit about what we do as a youth group?
Yeah, so we are split up into groups, and we're usually there for a little bit shorter than a week, 5 days, and we just go out onto the streets and we pray to people, minister to people, see if they need like water, food, just anything to kind of help them out and give them something to look forward to, I guess, because a lot of people we don't realize how fortunate we are to have what we have here. And so going there, it's really a humbling experience to get to just talk to people and hear their stories and be like a person to them and a friend to them and care for them. And that's pretty much what we do. And then we all just kind of minister, and it's like a prayer to them, but a prayer to us as well, and a blessing. So it's really good and a great humbling experience.
I would agree. I think that, the whole idea behind it is the relationship. So it's like a relational ministry. We do pass out some things, but we don't spend a lot of time necessarily giving or building houses, kind of like you were saying, but it's more about spending time with people. And our prayer, I know for Chris and Amy and I, is always that, that we would do that there in New Orleans, but then we would also be able to do that here in Thomasville.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I've had a lot of people also say, well, why do you need to go away on a mission trip? What do you guys think that does to you when you go away?
I think that it gives us a change of perspective. Cause since we are based in Thomasville, it kind of going somewhere else, somewhere where like not necessarily everybody is familiar with, it just kind of helps them, I don't know, explore out of their comfort zone and kind of push for them, rather than it being in their hometown.
And I think that once you experience that, like, you can't help but come back and do that in your hometown. So I think Cassie's absolutely right. Sometimes you have to go away in order to then experience it. in your everyday life.
Yeah, I agree with that as well, because we've been doing this, of course, on the streets of Thomasville too. It's one of the things when we have D now, we'll take the kids and take them around Thomasville. But I know you and Chris will often load the van up and take them to Atlanta or take them around Thomasville. And I just love it because there are people out there who they just need a smile. They need some encouragement. And do you guys find that a lot too? That it's often just encouraging somebody.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes, like, you go out to help people, but they end up helping you because you didn't even know that you needed to hear something or that you needed to experience what they were experiencing. So it's also just like, even if you needed a smile, you didn't even know it and you were given one. And it's just like a really nice peace of mind.
Absolutely. I mean, I absolutely agree. I think, this year, especially out of all years, I think that people were so hungry for hope and so hungry for somebody just to spend time with them. And not necessarily even just to spend time with them, I think was just the biggest thing.
I agree. And I think that's even more important moving forward is what you were saying, Lauren, just being able to establish relationships with people and just showing people that you care. And people were hungry. I noticed that more than ever in New Orleans this year. Mm-hmm. Cassie, I know that there was a story that you shared about last year that really touched your heart. Would you mind talking about that?
Yeah, for sure. So Lauren and I were actually in the same group last year, and it was my first summer going to New Orleans. I was not really excited to go, so I didn't really have the best attitude about it. And for some reason, I just always kind of end up being like the talker and like the going into the conversation, being the greeter. But like I was apprehensive about walking up to these two ladies who were there for the Essence Festival because I didn't know if they would think that we're like really weird, like being like, hey, like, how are you today type of thing. So we like walked up to them and we were like, we had bandanas and we were like, hey, it's like really hot out. Do y'all want some bandanas and like water or anything? And I just like sat down next to them and like started asking like the basic questions, like their name, like what they're here for, where they're from type of thing. And they turned out like being so cool, and they told me that they wanted to pray for unity and love and to come together as one. And it's like something that I didn't know that I needed at the time because I was kind of like lost in my faith, I guess, because I didn't really know like what was next for me or what was my plan. Because it was just like the awkward age where you like just turned 16 and you're like, oh, what's next for me type of thing. Like, what's your plan, God? And so seeing them and getting to talk to them was really eye-opening for me because like how I said earlier, like it's something that you don't know that you need, but you actually need. And I know that they were sent like or put in my path for me, and like I got to pray for them. And I know that like when I was praying, it wasn't me praying, it was like the Holy Spirit praying through me. And because like I got done and Lauren was like, why like haven't you done this before, like you should have like been talking before and stuff. And I was like, I don't even know like that I prayed or like what I prayed about. And she's like, it was like an awesome prayer. And I was like, oh great, cool. And then later like I was reading my Bible and it hit me like what I had said, and it was just like literally like so overwhelming. I just like started crying because it's not something that you think that you need, like unity and love, but it's like what the world needs too. And so getting to experience that and see that, but kind of just have like, I guess, a come to Jesus moment is what I'd say. It was really refreshing and good to talk to them and like how they stood out and inspired me, but I also inspired them because like they cried and I cried type of thing and hugged.
Yeah, and I remember one of those ladies told you that there was something really difficult going on in her life at that time.
Yeah, her husband was sick, and I'm pretty sure one of the ladies had just gotten a divorce, and they needed comfort, and they believed in God, but they also were like, okay, like why are bad things happening to me? And I was just like, you have to believe that something good is going to come out of it, because God would never, like, he might throw something at you, but it's going to like make you a better person, or it's going to make something like better in life for you come out of it. It's only going to help you or make you stronger. So it gave them peace of mind, I think, and it gave me peace of mind as well.
Yeah. And I love that too, because so many times we don't always have the courage to go up to somebody that God may be prompting us to go up to. But you really never know what somebody may be going through. And just knowing that both of those ladies just needed just that touch. And then to be faithful and just let the Lord just pray through you. That's another thing that I see a lot of children that go on, or young adults who go on this trip. I see them grow so much and just learning how to pray. And so many times we do have the model prayer, what Jesus taught us and what everybody calls the Lord's Prayer, but just being able to just practice. And there's no perfect way to pray. There's no right way to pray. It's just let your heart just let it out.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people are kind of self-conscious whenever they pray. And so kind of pushing them out of their comfort zone to be like, all right, like just say what's on your heart, on your mind. Don't like overthink it type of thing.
Yeah.
Just free flow it, and like it'll be the most like refreshing feeling ever. And I feel like I just kind of, before that, like I was thinking to my like self, and then I'd like be talking to them, and I was like, okay, God, just like speak through me, and like I will work at your hands and your feet if you just like pray through me and you give me what I need to say to get to them and to make them feel refreshed, and like they needed the smile, and that they got what they needed out of like a really random kind of conversation where we're like, hi, how are you?
Yeah. And Lauren, you've been doing this for a while, and that just strikes me as just almost odd in a sense, because I've known you for so long, and I don't want to put a label on you like introvert, but to some degree, I think you are. And so to know that you can get out on the streets and just be in your comfort zone really speaks to just anybody can get out there. And
absolutely. I think over the years, God has taught me so much. And I think, like Cassie was saying, I think sometimes we get stuck in the mindset that we have to have the right words, and that's not necessarily the case. I know that a woman that I talked to this year, in fact, as soon as I walked up to her, she said, I want nothing to do with your Jesus. And I just looked at her and I said, I'm so sorry. Would you mind if I sat with you anyway? We don't have to talk about Jesus. And I just felt this overwhelming sense of just the Holy Spirit saying, it's not about your words. It's not about convincing her of anything. It's about you showing her my love. And so we just sat and we just talked for the longest time. And she just shared with me all the reasons that she was angry with God. She had lost a son to drugs. She hadn't communicated with 2 of her children. Financially, she was struggling. She had been in an abusive relationship. And so she just had all these really heavy things. And she was very angry at God that she was having to walk through those things. And she kept on sharing some more. And I asked if I could share with her my testimony and my story. And I went ahead and told her, I said, I can't help but talk about Jesus when I share with you my story. But I said, if you don't want me to, that's okay. Like I can continue to sit here and listen to you, because I think sometimes people really just need somebody just to listen. And so, she did let me share my story, and when I got done, she thanked me, and I never convinced her of anything different. I'm not sure that when I walked away, she wasn't just as angry at God as she was when I first sat down, but just that idea of the Holy Spirit saying, no, like just stop and be still and show this person my love.
That's such a good point, because I think so many times too, we think that we've got to hand out a pamphlet, or the minute we see somebody, we've got to share the gospel with them. And really, it's about living the gospel out in you and showing somebody love. That was one thing that occurred to me too on this trip, was that I think there were some people who were new on the trip and they were nervous. And I just said, look, people will see Jesus in you. They will notice something different about you, even if you don't say a word.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Another thing that happens on mission trips that is kind of interesting, is Cassie kind of touched on this, is how God will work in your heart. And so he'll change things in you also. And so this is just something really little and trivial, but Lauren and I on this trip ended up finding out that we have so many things that we have in common. And Even Amy and I had no idea she and I have an affection for hard candy. But it's fun to learn things that you have in common with other people. But one of the funniest things that happened to me is I had my group in the 15-passenger van, and we didn't really know where we were going. But before I knew it, we were going over the really tall Mississippi River Bridge. And as we're driving up on it, and I'm seeing that it's getting higher and higher, I look over at Mila, who was in the passenger seat, and I said, Mila, I'm really scared of heights, and I'm not real comfortable with bridges. And she goes, I'm not either. It's like, oh my gosh, of all people to have in the front seat with me, why is it Mila? But it's just interesting how we made it over that bridge. And if we went over it, we had to come back over it. So we ended up going over that bridge twice, and we made it, and we were stronger. And then the day before we were leaving, I had 2 groups in my van. So it was a really full van. And once again, here comes a bridge. Well, we're in New Orleans. What do you expect? You got the Mississippi River all around. So we start going over this bridge. I made it over it. And then coming back, it just started storming. And so I had to go over this bridge. I'm literally looking in front of me. I see lightning crack down and hit something on the ground.
Oh, gosh.
As we're going over the bridge. You must have, Amy was in the passenger seat beside me, and she looked like she was a stockbroker or something. She was getting phone calls, texts, because people in our group were stuck under bridges, and we were trying to coordinate everybody.
We were under the parking garage.
Yeah. So she's trying to coordinate everybody getting back to the hotel safely. And the whole time it's just pouring rain, lightning, thunder, and I'm driving that packed van over that bridge again. But I always tell people that if you have a fear of flying, you're going to have to get on a plane. And I really feel like that's what God did in that situation. He took me out of my comfort zone, and I feel much more comfortable now if I'm going to go over a bridge. And have you guys noticed that too, though, that God will really take you out of your comfort zone when you do something that you may not want to do?
Definitely. Yeah. I don't know, just I guess talking to strangers, like, it can just be kind of weird, but it turns out that you become like their really good friend, and that's kind of like in New Orleans, like you just walk up to people like, oh, let's go talk to them, like, that'll be good, that'll be great. And you walk up to them, and you're like, you don't know how they're gonna come off, and then you're like, okay, well, I got this type of thing. But your van story made me think of something really funny that happened to our group while we were in a van. We Mr. Chris was driving, and we came across this restaurant, and there was a really long line out, and they were all standing 6 feet apart, and Madeline and I were like, oh my gosh, that must be some really good steak. Like, that restaurant looks really, really good. And Mr. Chris was like, should we go minister to them? And then a guy in a hazmat suit swings the door open. And it's like, it's this COVID testing center. We're like, all right, we're not going to minister to them. But then Mr. Chris, like, starts looking out the window and looking at everybody. He, like, goes to the other side of the road. And I'm like, Mr. Chris. Like, I start panicking because I was in the front. And I was like, we're going to die, like, next to the COVID center. Like, we're gonna wreck and be stuck next to the COVID testing center. And so I was like, you have to swerve. So he, like, reared off, and it was the funniest thing. And then we got on the bridge after that, so that was the adventure.
Well, and Lauren and Cassie, talk about that too, because I was in a youth group when I was growing up, and I did end up straying when I was in college and for most of my 20s, but I can remember the good, fun, clean times we would have with the youth group. So speak a little bit about young people being involved in a youth group and how it can really have a strong impact in their lives.
So I think, so when I started attending the walk when I was, I think a junior, maybe a sophomore or a junior in high school. And I'll never forget, you talked about how I'm an introverted person, and I think that there is some component to that, but I think a lot, and that's my testimony, is that a lot of that is actually just like a lack of confidence. And over the years, Chris, told me over and over again, like, he believed in me, and he knew that I was capable, even when I couldn't see that for myself. And so through the years, for me personally, that youth group was about showing me what I was capable of, and it taking me out of my comfort zone, and God using Chris and Amy to say, this is what you're capable of, and leading me in that way. But then also, giving me that community and just that joy that you were talking about, just, good, clean fun. And so now that I've continued into adulthood, I now, I have that more of a confidence that I was lacking before. And I've been able to see that, okay, God could use me when I was, a sophomore and a junior in high school. Well, God's also going to use me at 27, and it might look a lot different. And so, so I just think that that's so important, and I think that that's why, we use students as leaders in our youth group. I mean, we use them as small group leaders, but we also use them as, they're the ones that come up with the ideas for what ministry looks like and what missions look like, and I just think that that's just so important. So,
yeah. Cassie, can you speak to that any as a teenager?
Yeah, for me, I started going towards the end of 5th grade, because Grayson was still going there, and I was like, I want to be cool like her, like, I want to go to a youth group, never, like, done that kind of before, and so I started going to that, and I had, like, all these friends that were older than me, and so they, like, went off and graduated, and as I got older, my friends started to come, but then they started to kind of come and go type of thing, and in high school, you kind of battle, like, who you are, what you want to do, who you want to be around and associate yourself with, and what you want to be, like, known for. And, of course, there's, like, the people that, like, party, like, the sports group, like, but there's never really, like, a solid, like, religious group, I'd say. Like, you never really find that anymore, which is really sad. But, at the youth group, you're going to continually have somebody there for you. And I'm, like, glad that I always say, like, oh, I found my people type of thing, because I have, and I know that I, like, can always go back to them no matter what, and they'll keep me grounded instead of me, like, veering off or not being who I don't want to be type of thing.
Yeah, and I think that the good thing about getting away, too, is we're all together, and typically we're in smaller facilities than what we were this past year. We
With
were very
one shower.
Yeah.
PVC pipes.
Yeah. It's pretty meager most years, but this year we were just so fortunate because of COVID. We ended up getting to stay in a hotel, but you still, every night we have that cohesion, and we have that time where everybody's together and everybody has a chance to share, and it really bonds people in their groups together.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I think is really cool is, like, you could have had such an impactful day on you and, like, be super inspired, but you never knew, like, who in the other groups felt the same way, or even felt, like, even had something, like, cooler happen to them type of thing. And so whenever we're all sharing our stories, it's really not, like, overwhelming, but it's, like, a peaceful overwhelmingness. Like, oh my gosh, like there's a change inside of me happening, and it's a good change, and, like, I want others to experience this. And I think that's, like, another reason why we go to New Orleans, is because we always, like, want people to experience the difference and the change going on inside of us as we feel daily.
You both have experience being out on the streets, and you can hear the Holy Spirit. A lot of people don't understand that. Can you explain a little bit more about just being able to be in tune with the Holy Spirit?
Yeah, so I think for me, a lot of that goes back to, I know at the beginning I kind of talked about that obedience, and I'm just so thankful for God, because something that I struggle with is, is that God that's speaking, or is that me that's speaking, and just trying to discern that. And when you're on the streets, I mean, you only have like 5 seconds, so you can't really have a debate of, okay, God, am I supposed to talk to this person? Am I not? And I just, through saying yes and being obedient in the small things, I've learned that even if I don't hear God correctly, even if I screw it up, because I'm human,
right?
God is so sovereign, and He is so faithful. And so even when I do screw it up, He can still use that situation. He can still make it for his good. And instead of being discouraged when a conversation doesn't go as I had planned, or if a person says, no, I don't want to talk to you, instead of leaving discouraged, taking a second to pray that God blesses that person and speaks to that person anyway, and then continuing to move forward. So that's kind of what I've learned about listening to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. I think that's good because, God He will let anybody hear anything they want to hear that He wants them to. And I had an incident this past year where, I know I shared this with you earlier, where I went up to somebody that we had run into 3 times. And, there's just certain people you connect with. And I had really connected with this person. And so I had felt God speak to my spirit and just say, I want you to share Zephaniah 3:17 with him. And I've learned that verse. I know that verse. But when I went up and tried to say that verse to him, I really messed it up. And I kept saying, it's in Zechariah, it's in Zechariah. And he was trying to look on his phone and found it. And he himself said, oh, wait, isn't it Zephaniah? I was like, oh yeah, that's right. But it is amazing how we make mistakes. Like you said, we screw up all the time, but God is so faithful. And He will take just even that little bit of obedience and use it.
Yeah. For me, it sounds like I'm kind of like schizophrenic almost. But like I hear another voice almost, and mostly I get like signs kind of like I'll pray about it like over if like when I go to New Orleans or if I'm doing something that involves missionarying, I will pray about it for like 2 weeks every night, and I'll just be like, Lord, give me a side, Lord, give me like a word. And every year He's always blessed me with a word or two. And like last year's was unity and love, and this year was like He literally said it to me in like a Latin phrase or Italian. I forgot what it was. But
I think you said Latin.
It was. I looked it up actually, and I thought it was the word like beatas, which means to be blessed, like blessed. And it turns out it was like Benedictine, so I don't know if He gave it to me in like an Italian form, but I had no clue what that word meant, but I understood it was the thing. And so I feel like every year He's just given me a word that like would be my yearly word type of thing to make someone feel more blessed, or to try and unify like a friend group or people and like do it through love type of thing. And so I feel like that's what he's done to me through signs and through words, and just talking to me through that, because that's how I understand best, instead of hearing someone like how Lauren was saying, like you don't know if it's you or God speaking in that term. And I'll be like, what? And so I'll just like pray. I'll be like, can you please give me a sign type of thing? And so I usually get a word like that, and that's how I usually know. And it gives me a peace of mind, or like kind of like a prompt, an idea on what I need to talk about, instead of like what I need to listen for, what I need to talk about, instead of me like throwing around random words or like random conversation. I try and kind of like stick to one thing to keep it like a theme like for myself.
Lauren, is there anything that you can speak to as far as stories of happening in Thomasville or happening in Atlanta, just a little more local?
Yeah, I mean, over and over again, you would think that over time it would start to just be routine, and it would just like, it would lose its uniqueness, and that's so not true. I mean, it's every time that we go out and we have conversations with people, God just works. And so most recently, we went to Tallahassee, and we went to a bus stop, and sometimes the only way that it gets to be routine for me is sometimes I get more focused on, have we reached everybody instead of have we spent time with one specific person. And Jake was on our Tallahassee trip, and he told me, or he reminded our group, he was like, this is not about how many people we talk to. He's like, this is about intentionally spending time with the one. And if we only minister to one person today, that's okay. And I remember being so humbled in that moment, and kind of frustrated, because I was like, okay, a 15-year-old just told me what for. And shouldn't I have this figured out by now? And it was right after that, though, that he reminded our group that we met this woman, and she just shared with us just her struggles, and she was struggling with alcoholism, and she had just found out from the doctor that it had ruined her liver. and that she, you know, she was going to be fighting for her life now. And so, and she hadn't even told her children yet. And so we just sat with her and we just listened and we prayed with her. And I know about a group in Tallahassee that I gave her the information for, and hopefully, you know, that gave her a resource to somebody to reach out to. But it was, for me, it was such a reminder of, Jake was absolutely right. He was like, it's about the one. And for us that day, she was the one. We ministered to other people and we got to talk to other people, but she was the one who we sat with, and it took time for us to build that relationship with her and listen about her children and her grandchildren. But after that, you know, she was the one that God really, you know, she really needed that hope in that moment.
I definitely tell the young people that I always learn more from them, and they always inspire me more than the people we meet.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely hearing their stories, and like whenever we gather at night and we just talk about our day and hearing their stories, and even if it's like at a regular just Sunday youth meet, and we're just talking about like outreach and stuff, hearing their stories and hearing like how it affected them, it really affects like the audience and like the person that's listening, like I more. And you never know who needs that.
Yeah, it can really encourage somebody in our own group.
And I last night my small group met, and it was really interesting. We were talking about, you know, how our words, and intentionally using our words this year to speak love over people. And it was so interesting to hear those that were on the trip share stories, but then it not stop with New Orleans, about how that's going to transfer over into their everyday lives. And their, you know, just, I mean, like you were saying, I'm so encouraged by their boldness and their willingness to say, you know, God used me to speak these things over anybody's life.
Yeah. And I think that's where people find purpose, is when you can take the focus off of yourself and you can get out and do things that God's leading you to do. You find purpose in that. And I think when people find a purpose, it helps them just in finding, you know, I do matter and God can use me. A story that happened to me in Thomasville, which again, it could just have only have been God. And I wasn't doing this with the Walk Youth group, but I used to teach a Bible study out at a trailer park. And as a matter of fact, the girls would go out there with me. I doubt they remember it because they were really little.
I remember it, but I didn't know you were doing that.
But we would also go out there and just knock on doors and just talk to anybody that we could talk to. And I remember going to this one lady's trailer, and she opened the door, and when we told her what we were doing, she said, I've been trying to get saved. And so one of the ladies that was with me was Miss Pat Roddenberry, and she ended up sharing the gospel with this lady, and she ended up getting saved. And so I ended up writing her a note, just encouraging her. And fast forward, I don't know how many years, but a lot of years later, and I was volunteering at the food bank. And so I was checking people in when they got there, and this lady sat in front of me, and she gave me her name. And I looked up at her and I said, did you live at so-and-so? And she looked at me and she said, you're that lady. You're that lady that wrote me that note. And she said that she kept that note on her bedside table. And when she got discouraged, she would read that note that I had written her. But how could God have placed us together? And I'm telling you, it was probably at least 7 years later. I had not laid eyes on that lady in 7 years. Just happened to be working at the food bank the morning that she comes in. She happens to sit at my table to be checked in. And it was just such a cool connection because we had, you know, met in that just God's way. And so we were connected at the heart, even though we didn't really know one another that well.
Yeah. I think, you know, it's kind of to follow up with that, one of my favorite things of getting to go to New Orleans multiple years, or getting to go to Atlanta or Tallahassee, you know, more than once is those relationships that we do get to continue to foster, because there have been years where we've gone back and they'll say, you know, oh, you're that group, or you're the one that we talked last year, or, you know, we're usually identified by the crazy bald man that's with us, Chris. And so, you know, just to continue to foster, because I think that that's what making a disciple is that continuation. And we don't always get to do that. Sometimes we're only the one planting the seed, but
That's right.
when we do get to have that follow up, it's really encouraging and something special.
Yeah. And I think that's so important to remember too, is we never know how intricately God is working in people's lives. And so literally we may just be that little seed that he just wants planted that day, and we may think nothing of it, but somewhere in that person's memory, they may say, you know, I just remember those people. They were just so kind. There was something different about them. And another thing that people notice a lot is just our youth have such good manners, and they are so kind and considerate to others. And that is often a statement to the people that are around us. I know the people at the hotel were just amazing. They had fun. I mean, especially when they were playing that catchphrase game, they were so loud. But when they were around that hotel, they were so nice. They were so friendly. They were so polite. And people noticed that.
I think that that's something that even the kids, some of the kids, you know, last night were talking about, they were like, people notice that we're different without us even having to say anything. And I think that is so true, that when we are, you know, when our love and our joy is coming from Jesus, people can't help but notice that there's something different.
Yeah. And they're going to play their pranks this past year.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you know, hot sauce is pretty common in
like,
New Orleans.
I was given a Jolly Rancher by one of the boys, and I was like, is this like the hot sauce Jolly Rancher?
Yeah.
And he was like, no, it's not. I promise you can smell it. And I was like, okay. And so I smelled the Jolly Rancher, and I put it in my mouth, and it was like totally dripped in hot sauce.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't even notice it because of the coloring. And it was like the grape Jolly Rancher or something, which was disgusting, but sorry. I put it in my mouth, and I was like, oh my gosh. And no one had water on the bus ride home. And so I was just sitting in the back. I was laying down. I was like, I'm about to cry or something because it burned so bad.
Yeah.
It was called the idiot hot sauce, wasn't it?
Yeah. Something. Yeah. And so I was throwing one of those Jolly Ranchers, and they decided they would put it in the jelly. So another one of our chaperones made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich one night and had her mouth burned by the jelly. And then they tainted the gumbo, and Chris was talking about how his lips were on fire after eating the gumbo.
He was sweating.
Yeah. And I took 2 bites and I put it down, and I said, "Dadgum, this stuff is hot." And I hear these snickers from the table beside us, people laughing under their breath, and I should have suspected something then, but it's all fun. And
absolutely,
I just encourage anyone out there who has a young person who is in middle school or a person who's in high school. We would love to have them at the Walk Youth Group, and you can go on the website to find out more information. The location is 229 Clark Road, and we meet twice a month when everything's meeting as normal in big groups, and then we have small groups as well.
Yes.
But you can contact me at Angie@revealedpodcast.org. I can give you more information, and we would love to pray for you too. So if there's something that you've really got on your heart, let us know, and check out our website, go on Facebook, find us on Instagram at Revealed Story. And I just want to thank Cassie and Lauren so much for joining me today.